I want to talk about blocks. So when you're blocked, it's an interesting thing. And I want to talk about it in relationship to flow. Because usually when you say you're blocked, it means that you are not in flow, that you're not able to get into the flow of writing, of acting, of whatever, right? And I feel like the way people talk about creativity or like being blocked isn't really helpful. It isn't helpful because usually what they say is like, oh, that's just selfishness. And because they took like a Meisner class once upon a time and somebody got self-conscious and the teacher said like, oh, that's just being selfish. And I know it was a Meisner class because I've been in that Meisner class. But that does not help. Yes, you can go back to like, oh, like the ego and spirituality, and yeah, it's part of the ego. Of course it is, like, absolutely. But most of it is part of the ego, right? Maybe even the fact that you want to be a creative is part of an ego, It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't help you through a block. It doesn't actively, shift you out of like, being stuck, because that's really what's happening. And in my experience, from first person experience, I can tell you usually it's either because of fear, because you're in survival mode, right? For instance, the last 3 months, I've been worried about where I was gonna like live, right? And so like I could not, like maybe like some like amazing Tony Award winning playwright like can write through that. I cannot write through that, right? And so like sitting down to write, and I couldn't even, right, fathom. I was just like, I need to find a place. And so like these things like tend to kind of zap your creative juices, because your creative juices are in fact a state of flow, and the state of flow is has to do with, going back to that Meisner class, being in the moment. Even if you're like, I'm saying this even if you're not an actor, I'm saying if you're a writer, if you're a director, whatever it is, block comes from a lack of flow, which comes from a lack of being in the moment. Your fears can block you, right? So like a fear of being seen, and you're on stage and you fear being seen. So some part of you is going to shut down to protect you because you fear being seen, right? Whereas like, you're like, okay, I worked through my fear of being seen. Look at me, world. That will allow, obviously like working through fears is a little more complex than that. But you've worked through it, hypothetically, and you get to this point where you're like, boom, like I'm hitting flow. So being blocked is in direct relationship to flow. Because what is block? A block is the thing that is keeping you stuck from being in flow. So it's like a direct relationship. I don't know if I said that because I already taped this. So if I did, I'm sorry. I'm repeating myself. But how do we like unpack this? You have to, like, most of it is journaling. I like doing the artist's way. Honestly, it does unpack a little bit of the thing, writing out what it is you're fearful of. But sometimes you recognize, but a lot of it is being present to how you're doing your thing, right? Like, how are you like writing? Like, what are the processes that you do to write? What are the processes you do to get into character? What are the processes you do to start singing, right? And sometimes it is in the act of doing that you actively block yourself. I'm going to give you an example. If you start writing and you're like getting into it, and all of a sudden you're thinking of how you're going to edit this, or like you're worried that you're like, I'm going to use one that I have a lot, right? I worry that I'm telling and not showing, and always feel like I'm telling somebody a story versus showing them, right? And that's like a huge thing with me. Like, I'm like, am I? And when you're writing, you should just be present to what is coming from brain to keyboard, right? You can't be worried about the component. And maybe some writers are gonna like disagree with me, but I actively think that if you're worrying about, you know, how the thing is being unearthed as it's getting like out of you, right? Like from here to there, like it's going to block you. You are going to get blocked because you are actively not in the moment, and you are actively conditioning yourself on what your process is, and the type, and your type of process is actively blocking you. So if you are blocked in writing something, a scene, if you are blocked in, you know, singing something, look at what are the processes that you do when you sit down. Are you present? I'm going to go back to writing because I think this is something that I just like unpacked for myself as well. If I am writing and I am not in the present moment with the image in my mind, and from image to keyboard, then I'm actively conditioning my body in the process of writing to get blocked, because I am not present with the word. I'm not present with the image. I am not present with the moment that the character is in, right? If I am an actor and I am worried about how I look, or, you know, if my voice isn't grounded enough, it happens a lot during training, right? You are actively conditioning yourself to not be in flow. And you're actually losing out on a lot of information, on a lot of data that comes in during flow, right? Because you're not even getting to flow. You're just struggling through a scene. It's like, so in terms of like scene work, I'm going to say this. It's sort of like, I love this thing that Al Pacino once said. He said, like, you do your homework. You throw it all against the wall, and then you see what sticks. You don't think about the process, you just do, right? Same thing with a writer. You just do. You just write. You don't think about the editing phase. You don't think about how your, you know, boyfriend is going to be, you know, like, you know, your sugar candy when you become famous off of like the next amazing, you know, fantasy book. You don't think about anything except writing. You are present and in the moment. And when you get yourself out of the moment, or you're like trying to edit as you write, you're actively blocking yourself. And I know that there's some writers that actually that's their processes, and will not agree with me, but I actively do think like that part of like this thing we do, that there is this flow state that gives you information, and that information sometimes makes things switch and turn in a way that you don't that you wouldn't have imagined in your brain. So for example, maybe you sing that song in a different way, right? Because you're in flow and you're just feeling it, right? The state of flow is a state of feeling. It is a presence that you bring to it. It reminds me when I studied with, oh my God, what's her name? Give me a second. We're